Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the LottieFiles podcast. Today I have here with me Saptarshi Prakash, a motion designer at Swiggy in India. Saptarshi, thanks for being here with me today. Let's start off with how you became a product designer. What led you here? Everyone has their own story, so what's yours?
Okay, thanks for asking. Yes, that's one of the most commonly asked questions that I encounter. So I'm an engineer. I studied engineering. I'm an electrical engineer. Design was always my hobby. I'm a self-taught designer today. So it always started with designing posters and T-shirts for your college festivals and hostels, and it just remained that way for a very long time. I never thought that this could ever be my profession, because well, back in those days when I was in college in 2014 or 2013, product design wasn't that big a thing here in India. Design was mostly about graphic design. Yes, smartphones were coming up, websites and everything was there, but it wasn't as popular as it is today in 2020. So I could never imagine that this would be a full-fledged career that I can pursue. But then things changed over time. A lot of startups came up in India, and design started getting that importance which wasn't there before. People started talking about that this is a usable app, this is an easy app, this is a beautiful app, stuff which nobody talked about before. So along those times. Yeah, there was a college senior from college who started working in one such startup, which was actually quite making a lot of noise back then in India. It was called housing.com, and people were talking about their good design. So he's the one who, my senior from college, he's the one who joined that company, and he referred me into that. So yes, that's how I professionally started designing.
So did you actually ever work as an engineer, or that just didn't end up happening?
It did well, not as an engineer. So the way it works in my college is you can get into any kind of job. So so I was more of a business organization or management sort of person. So I ended up taking a managerial job at an MNC out here in India itself. It was an American multinational, and I worked there for a year as a project manager. And yeah, and after a year is when I switched to this design role.
How long have you been a designer at Swiggy for?
For Swiggy, it's been around 2 years, slightly less than 2 years.
Talk me through what things were like, particularly maybe let's say at Swiggy before Lottie animations came around, because you've been at Swiggy 2 years, which is kind of sort of how long Lottie animations have been around for.
So yeah, motion design, again, now that I'm professionally a designer, motion design is my hobby, right? So I started learning motion design just because I liked it, and I liked the cool stuff which people used to post on Dribble, and I thought I should learn the skill, and that's how I started. And when I joined Swiggy, there wasn't anyone else in the team, who was doing motion design or anything related to animations or motions. Of course, there were some people who were doing a bit of it, but when I came in, the expectation was to use motion wherever possible to solve certain problems, be it delight or be it any kind of thing. So yeah, I started exploring what could be done, what could we do better with motion within the app. So one thing which happened after Lottie came was the development time reduced drastically, like drastically. Previously, for even a small animation like say a green tick which comes after you have successfully made a transaction, would take upward of a week or week and a half, or maybe even 2 weeks for that to be coded natively, and that too it had to be done separately for the web platform, Android and iOS. With Lottie, that entire phase is reduced to less than 30 minutes. So all that happens is, we create the animation in After Effects, we generate it using, Lottie, and then finally we have a JSON file, and it just takes barely 15 or 20 minutes of configuration, where the developer comes, sits with us and says, okay, how should this? I said, okay, just move it a bit, or move this up a bit, scale it up, this and that, and then we are done, gone, and it works on all the platforms. So we are saving a lot of time, a lot of time.
Whoa, a week to 30 minutes, that is a huge difference.
Yeah.
When Lottie first came about, very few people knew that it was actually started from Body Moving, which was created by Hernan, and then Airbnb picked it up and sort of created the mobile libraries. I think it was when Airbnb started talking about it as an animation file format that it really picked up traction. When did you start hearing about it, and sort of where did you discover it, and what sort of made you think, oh, this is something really interesting?
It was, on social media the first time. So people started talking that, hey, Airbnb has started something called, Lottie, and using which animations can be, the SVG animations can be created right out of After Effects. So it'll reduce a lot of time. So that made me curious. So I went and read about it. And this was, of course, pre-Swiggy period. So even before I joined Swiggy, Lottie had started, I remember. So, and I read about it and I figured out that, yeah, this is actually a very cool thing. So I tried out a few smaller animations just for the heck of it, just to try it out. And there was a developer friend in my previous organization. So, we experimented a lot of things, how it is performing, with how does it affect with the number of paths, or is image a better solution than vector, and all those things. So that's where I had experimented with a lot of these things. And yeah, I believe Lottie is evolving with every passing day.
When it came to using Lottie and any Swiggy products, did you ever notice any change after you implemented them in, let's say click-through rate, engagement, time spent on the app? Was there anything measurable that you noted after implementing these?
Well, so far, we have extensively used a lot of Lottie, but I'm not sure if I'm in a position to show anything measurable, because, design is one such thing. You cannot absolutely say that because we did this has happened. But of course, in certain cases, I don't need a number to prove that we have done a much efficient job at say telling a story or explaining a concept by using an animation, which otherwise wouldn't have been possible if something like Lottie had not existed. Maybe we had to resort to text, or maybe just a text image combination. So there, we wouldn't know if people would read it or skip it. I'm talking from, explaining a new service or a new product line, for instance. So with Lottie, we have the liberty to maybe use just a few seconds of time and just show it in an animation, which drives the point much better than a text or a text image combo could do.
You've touched here a bit on the UI of the product, and that's making me wonder a bit more about how you use the UI as a vehicle to communicate to your Swiggy users, and kind of how has animation been a key tool to really enhance that communication?
Well, different things had different reasons. Let me tell you about this thing that I'm talking about. So, Swiggy is primarily into food delivery, like, or rather, to put it in the right way, we were always into food delivery. So, a place where you could order food from a restaurant and it gets delivered to your home or to your office or wherever. Then there were certain business changes, and we thought that, it's a good time to invest in a model where we do not just deliver food but other things as well, where we deliver grocery, or we could pick something from you and deliver it to your friend's house, and medicines, essentials, pet care, everything. So it became a whole suite of products and services which has anything to do with delivery. So this was a kind of a paradigm shift, because people always related Swiggy with food. Now, when we launched these services, we had to tell the people that, hey, you know what, now you have newer stuff. It's not just what Swiggy used to be before. So there, the challenge was, because it was not one single thing that was happening. There were multiple things which were happening. Especially the things which are not cataloged. For instance, to explain a user that now you can pick a charger from your home that you've forgotten and get it dropped to your house. Explaining that use case and explaining or giving the user that idea that, something like this can be done itself was the big challenge. It would need one paragraph of text if I were to explain that. So, and that we don't have the liberty to use so much of text on the app. So we felt, we could resort to animation. We just showed an animation of a biker who just goes not just in front of a restaurant, but it goes in front of a grocery store, in front of a medical store. It stops, and then waits, and then goes on to the next place, and finally delivers it to an apartment. So, by just using 7 or 8 seconds of animation, we try to convey at least 80% of what we are doing. So I believe that's a win-win, lesser time and as much communication as possible.
So storytelling sounds like a big part. Obviously, it is a big part of animation, but in particular, what you've done at Swiggy, I'm curious to know that as animation can sort of bring things to life, that in the case of Swiggy, would you maybe say that animated characters in particular has helped humanize the brand's delivery riders?
Yes, it certainly does. Like humanizing is something that everyone is talking about because it's 2020. It's not just that make a functional app and it does the work and we are fine. Because there are humans behind everything that we're doing. It's a human who is actually collecting your food, bringing it to your door. The person might be getting wet in the rain and the scorching heat, everything. So bringing out that kind of empathy is really important in front of our users. And animation has been helping us in that aspect a lot, right? I mean, recently we did another animation, like tipping for our delivery executive is something that we have been thinking for a very long time. So we were thinking about it. We have also made it and even built it. But then came this COVID scenario where it started making a lot more sense than before, because now people are not just battling rain and sun for you, but also something even more dangerous. And it's always good if our users are aware and they can empathize with the people who are taking that extra effort to deliver your food and essentials. So there we did, if someone would add a tip, we would have a delivery person just passing by, and there's a bit of confetti, and the delivery guy stops there, the animation stops there, and it just raises his hands in joy, and then it just goes away. So that's nothing but a small delighter. Okay, might seem like a very trivial thing which is not even needed, but it drives a lot of feelings into the minds of the people that, hey, you know what, this button that I have tapped, this additional tip that I'm making is going to make a lot of difference into the lives of someone who's putting that extra effort for me. So yeah, like it has helped us tremendously in storytelling that way.
Have there ever been any other campaigns where you've used animation like that to sort of evoke particular emotions and sort of tell certain stories?
There had been many instances, like I think two I've already mentioned. There are many other things as well, if not in the app. At times we do it for our social media, where we want to drive a point home, or we want to highlight certain kind of effort that we are putting, which is not seen otherwise, so that people start building a different kind of impression about the company or about the team behind or the brand in general. So we have been doing that, and in some of those cases, maybe Lottie isn't quite needed because you can actually post a video. But there's like one more thing I would want to highlight in this aspect is animations as a function. For example, of course, this was done in a pre-Lottie period, and we are still figuring out a way if we can do it using Lottie. Like, there's always a need for highlighting certain things in the UI, right? So, this text needs to be seen because this is important. And, and the way to do it is, either you bump up the color with something brighter, or maybe you increase the weight or have a brighter color, bolder, and stuff like that. But with animation, there is one thing extra, which is one thing above everything, all of these that I have said that we can do, right? So this is something that we have done with the discount icon. And India is a value-driven market, and people seek for discounts in whatever they invest in. So every restaurant in our app, comes with some sort of a discount that we offer, be it 20% or certain kind of discount, and that text has an icon right before it. So one thing that we did was, when you scroll through the listings, as you scroll, the discount icon spins with how much you have scrolled. So that highlights the discount bit in a very subtle way. Maybe I didn't do a great job at explaining what that looks like, but maybe you can try it out. You can just download the Swiggy app and set some location to India, and as you scroll through, you will see what I'm saying. So the icon just spins. So you stop scrolling, the spinning stops. So you scroll faster, it spins faster. So it is just connected to your scroll. So I think we did a great job at highlighting the discount bit without doing anything special, or without bumping the color or increasing the size or anything.
So as a product designer, what would you say is the most important thing you consider before even starting off designing any product?
There are many important things, but if you ask me to pick up one, I would say it's the user. It's the human who's going to be on the other side of the table, who's going to finally use it. So, certain decisions that we take can completely change the nature of the product and the offering that we are making, right? Like, let me give you an example of Swiggy itself. Like, Swiggy is a app which sells food, right? Primarily food and some other things as well. But very few people actually know that Swiggy also has another app that also sells food, but that's a different app. The reason being, the kind of food that is sold there is different. And those are in the other app, we call it Swiggy Daily. It's not restaurant food that is sold there, but it's food which is cooked in a home style way. and there are a lot of home chefs which are involved in that process as well. So which means, if you're looking for something that you can eat every day without having to bother about your health, like Indian food is spicy and oily, but it's not the best for your system maybe, and certainly not something that you would want to eat every day. So Swiggy Daily caters to that kind of audience. So there, it's more than the taste of the food, it's the way it is prepared, the care that's being put into it. And the fact that it has come from a real home makes it a lot different. And since it's a different emotion which is associated with that, it is designed in a different way. There's a lot more storytelling in that app than you would find in the Swiggy main app, right? So if you see, again, it's the same thing. These are two apps, both of them sell food, both of them cater to the final audience, the same sort of audience, but the nature and the expectation of the audience in both these cases are so different. So they're designed in very different way, right? So I think, to put it short, again, it is the users and what they need. These are like the two most important things that I would say that we need to keep in mind when designing the UX of anything.
So Lottie Animation has kind of made it so much more possible for designers to be very much, well, it has empowered designers in a way to be very much more involved in the development of a product. And in that sense, also the UI, because no longer is it sort of down to just the developer. The designer actually can create that animation independently. How do you think that's changed things for you guys as designers?
Many things. But the most important thing that we see is the quality. Because previously what we would do is, we would put the same amount of effort on After Effects, create a video which is just a sample, so that, we could communicate it well to the developer. We would show them, hey, what, this is how it's supposed to move, this is how it's supposed to jump, or this is how it's supposed to everything. And in this process, it doesn't always translate completely, right? Because you are doing it using lines of code. Here I'm doing it using different tools. So there is a delta. And at times the delta can get much larger depending on the designer who's working or the developer who's working, and many other constraints which are involved. But with Lottie, it just completely removed the delta, because the delta doesn't exist at all. It's almost like an image asset, just like you have an icon today and I can change it into an icon tomorrow and a different icon tomorrow, and it just seamlessly sits where it is supposed to. It is just like that. We just give an asset, just that it's not just a vector image, but it's a vector movie. It plays as well. And if we want to change it, it's all about changing the JSON file and we are good to go. So that delta is completely removed.
So having this more design efficient workflow, I guess you could say undoubtedly that product quality should in general increase by leaps and bounds, everywhere.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm wondering if you have anything else in particular to say about Lottie as a designer. There's be a lot of designers maybe listening who are perhaps new to Lottie and not 100% sure of its benefits. Obviously, you've mentioned time, but maybe designers who maybe don't necessarily work in big companies with devs, how can they sort of do everything themselves that before previously they would have thought, oh, I need to know how to code?
Well, one thing in that I would like to point out about our developers, since you said about them. I would really want to thank our developers, because they are extremely they're up for doing anything. I wouldn't be surprised if a developer comes running to us with a gleaming eyes saying that, hey, you know what, this new thing has come up and now because of that we could do this possibilities have unlocked, so why don't you make something really cool? So that's the kind of developers we have, but I know that that's not the case everywhere. Maybe I'm lucky enough to work in an organization like that. But in either ways, if I were to speak in terms of Lottie, for people who are motion designers or animators but who haven't, say, explored Lottie, both from a designer and from a developer point of view, things are extremely simple. I conduct workshops on motion design out here in India. So one of the questions which people ask me is, how do we use Lottie? Can we have a workshop on how do we use Lottie? So my answer to that is, you don't need a workshop for Lottie because it's so simple. So it's just about clicking one button and exporting. Just like you export a video, right now you export it in a different format. It's as simple as that. And implementing it is simple again. And even I think Lottie started supporting, or rather some platforms like Webflow, which are low code or less no code or less code platforms. They also started supporting Lottie. So if you're specifically asking about designers who want to animate something and use it in their own projects, in websites or stuff like that, they can even do that without having to depend on any hardcore coding. It's great that something like Lottie has come up. I always say when people ask me about tools, which tool is the right one for creating the right thing, I always say that it's never dependent on tool, because tools change. Tomorrow a new tool would come, which would be so simple that there won't be any learning curve, and you'd be able to do exactly the same thing that you are able to do today, using a more complicated tool or a more complicated method. I think Lottie essentially has solved a large part of it. Like I said about the development part, what would take, you could imagine what would take a week or two is taking less than 30 minutes today. So, I'm hoping that Lottie evolves more and it starts handling the things which it doesn't today. For example, transitions or interactive animations, like you have said. If there's even a way, where the user could control the seek of that animation based on something. Imagine, say, if I'm designing an onboarding and when the user swipes, the animation executes. Of course, there are trade-offs and hacks using which you can achieve that even today. But if it natively supports on Lottie, I think it'll be much more efficient, and I'm really looking forward to that day when, Lottie does that.
You and a lot of other people. We're very sure that in the future that these things will be possible. I think we've put no limits on what could be possible with Lottie at this point in time. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. It has been super, super insightful to sort of get into your head and figure out why you design what you design for Swiggy, and also Swiggy as a product. Give us all a better understanding of what is the intention behind the animations used there. Well, not just the animations, but also because the interface as a whole, the product as a whole. And it's really great to get that insider view from you.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. It's great to speak to you folks. You guys are doing wonderful stuff at LottieFiles. I extensively use the platform for previewing my designs and also using your plugin for generating the assets that I need to hand over to my developers. And I think it's a lifesaver. It helps us a lot, and I wish you guys grow and do wonderful stuff in the future.